I'm going to start just by saying that I actually didn't really think about this, but having Pedro go last and having him talk about chronic inflammation and the very complex relationships that occur in chronic inflammation was actually a very nice way of putting together the various messages that all of us spoke about today. I don't know if you planned to do that, but that worked out really well. And it was a little surprising to me even that there were recurrent themes that came up. Insulin resistance and a variety of things was something that came up. The importance of various types of fatty acids and how the brain worked and how the gut worked came up. Some of the stuff about how a lot of the environmental stuff is important to our physiology, like how much light do we get and how much sleep do we get and how much exercise do we get, and so really as a doctor, the way I look at this is, we give medicines to people, but what we're really aiming for is prevention. Once you're sick, especially with, like, for example, kidney disease, we can't do anything for you. Prevention is the only cure. And so really here what we want to look at is, what are some of the common pathways that we see that we can accomplish more than one thing by doing something like, changing our diet or exercising or sleeping. And so with that, I think I'll open it up to, say, Professor Crawford to wake up.
What do you want?
So
You want me to start asking questions?
No, I want you to talk a little bit about how do you see how we can put all of these messages together?
I've absolutely no idea. It is so complex, but I think that one of the first things, apart from the fact that we all know that we need to get exercise, therefore this is something we can do without anybody else interfering. And Darren would doubtless show us the things we can do when we wake up in the morning, all this kind of thing, in our own home and in our own time. But so far as the nutritional side is concerned, we've lost completely. As I said, that our genomes is only 1.5% of frequency. So our physiology is adapted to what foods, and the super intensified foods that we now have today have drifted miles away in terms of what they actually provide for the health of our arteries, the health of our immune system, the health of our reproductive system, the health of our brain. And we have to somehow address this. Quite recently, there was a 400 team of people internationally looked at the food and agriculture for the planet. And this was people across the world. It's called Foresight. It's the think tank that was involved. They said that the amount of arable land that was available for humanity to exploit had reached a limit. We know that the marine food web has also reached a limit. The astonishing thing about this report, which went to governments right across the world, there was absolutely no mention about the brain. And there's somehow a complete absolute lack of understanding of basic principles. And I put this down to the fact that not only after World War II was there a complete reversal of the nutrition health policy that we had during the war, but also they started to diminish and then completely eliminate from the school curriculum anything of education about food. Home economics, when I grew up in Edinburgh, whole university, School of Home Economics in Apple Crescent, and that taught the teachers how to teach home economics, education about food, nutrition, and all the rest of it. And once that was all closed down, the food industry then had carte blanche to do what the hell they wanted. And they did what the hell they wanted. And we're in the mess we are now because of that. And that has to be reversed. We have to start some kind of a movement. One is to get education back into the school so that the children are empowered with knowledge to make their own decisions about what they eat, what they do in terms of health and their future children if they're going to have any. And that is absolutely paramount. The medical schools need education as well. I think my university, Edinburgh, had about 3 hours of nutrition education for the whole curriculum. And this is responsible for all the non-communicable diseases. I mean, for heaven's sakes, this is completely absolute. It is. We're getting to the top point of the world where idiocracy is remember to know about it. We're beginning to take over. And it's time that it was changed. The medical schools really should be the leaders of this. They should be the ones that introduce nutrition science on a parallel strength with pharmacological science. In pharmacology, they get a year full of absolute intensive education. They can do postgraduate and postdoctoral degrees till the cows come home in pharmacology. But in nutrition, no. 3 little lectures.
And I would say that I didn't learn anything about exercise in medical school either, so.
Yeah.
Sleep's little too.
No, you do. That's true.
So I'll give it to you. I'll talk after
Sure.
I just finished one.
Yeah, you can let your voice rest. I can make a couple of comments off of. So I completely agree. I think that our healthcare system really only represents half of what we need. I think we absolutely need cutting edge science for surgery and medical interventions, including drugs, when needed, but not at the expense of radically enhancing the education around self-care. And the more that our world provides signals and pressures to live askew from natural living conditions, the more that we need to arm ourselves with the knowledge that teaches us how to be a little bit weird in today's world, to not live in the same pattern and under the same influence that everybody around us is, so that we can have a different outcome than what is so highly statistically significant now for all these chronic diseases, which are really all linked with some fundamental physiological mechanisms. I think that we're not going to see the right interventions through the healthcare system. I think we need to go around it. An ideal scenario means that it needs to begin in school-age children, where they're learning the evolving capacity to take care of themselves in a world where your own desire for health is changing in the lifespan, the information base is changing, and the world is changing rapidly. It can change overnight with the introduction of things like Fortnite or whatever, that huge swaths of people now are doing this new thing that is defining a new pattern of living. So we need to work in schools, but it doesn't mean that if you're an adult now that you are hopeless. So that's what I'm actually doing with Human OS in my business, is trying to create education and tools that both help people be informed about what actually drives health today, and then separately give them tools and interventions so that it makes it easier in their life. So I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
I think I forget the original question, but if I were to have some total public health message for people, I think it would be thinking about certain things about our modern society and modern life and our mental health. Number one is that we live in a society where we have bamboo sheets and airplanes and the perfect kind of cushion and all sorts of games and fun things on your phone, and all of these things are basically designed to entertain and comfort us at all times, so that we are not inconvenienced, and so that we feel good. And yet, most of us run around like chickens with our heads cut off, really anxious, overscheduled. And we fundamentally have to think about what's driving us and just about this modern lifestyle and pressure and 24/7. People working with international companies and up all night answering phone calls and up early in the morning answering phone calls. Because it's very destructive. Stress is a risk factor for every single different psychiatric disorders. There are different genetic and other environmental risk factors, but stress is pretty universal for all of them. I guess the second thing I would think about too is that what would our world be like without processed food? Maybe there'll be a lot less of us, so in both ways, but if we didn't have our sort of modern agriculture and processed food, but if you think about your mood after you've had a processed food meal, maybe 90 minutes later, you're starting to kind of crash and feel really gross. And think about road rage. If you're out on the highway and it's about 4 or 5 o'clock and a lot of people go home, they're way past their last meal, or they ate a Snickers bar at 2:30 after they crashed after their lunch at noon. What would the world be like if we didn't have processed food and those dietary crashes and that anger that we know that comes from the glucose spikes and then drops very rapidly? And sometimes I think about that a lot when I'm sitting in traffic coming home. So if we could change these things, if we could modify some of these things, we'd be just calmer, more serene, and more resilient, and I wouldn't have to work as hard, which is great.
That was great.
I'm actually really not that confident about education being the solution. The reason I say that is because if you think about our physiology, our DNA, what got us here, a lot of it is primed on the fact that we prize convenience. We prize shortcuts to achieve an objective, which means even in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, when there's a significant ramp up on the education around smoking cessation, didn't have that much of an impact. For example, a significant impact came when it became increasingly more and more difficult to smoke. Banned in the workplace, banned on public transport, it becomes socially unacceptable. So I think human change is so very difficult based on education alone. Even thinking about myself, who's been living this lifestyle for about 15 years, I'm far from perfectly implementing what I would like to, even though I know all of the drawbacks. I know exactly what will happen if I partake certain foods which are not on the healthy tablet. I know what will happen to me when I'm sedentary, but I'm still drawn to play my Xbox sometimes, even though hopefully I'm spending more of that time standing whilst I'm playing. But I just think there's so many drivers for us to be wooed by convenience. And so education, I don't believe the solution. I don't believe technology will be the solution for us. I don't believe scientific advance will be the solution for us. I think we need a radical change and a shift at ensuring that our environment makes it easier for us to live healthier lifestyles. So our environments, our landscape needs to change. For us to become more active at the societal level, we need to make it easier for us not to take public transport, for example. We need to not be seduced by transport and labour-saving devices and all these things that are wonderful to have access to, but we're increasingly being seduced by. And I think it's exactly the same around food. We probably do need to have some very strict regulation to make it much more difficult for us to be moved by fast food and artificial processed food, because unfortunately that's what I really love. That's what I love, even though I know the drawbacks. And I think most of us in this room are probably aware of that too. Most of us have been sitting all day, even though we know it's harmful to our health, right? Most of us know that it probably should be better for us to be outside today getting some sunshine than to be here learning more about the intellectual aspects of this lifestyle. So I'm probably the downer, and from the panel on the kind of dystopian view of our future, unless we have a radical shift in regulation from the top down to make a difference for our future.
Okay. Let's open for questions.
Yeah, open up for questions. Okay.
So Daryl just blew out any chance I have of saying anything. So this means that we'll open for questions from you guys, from the audience.
Many questions there. So, what we do?
Polly, did you?
No, thank you. Great.
Sorry, question. First of all, thank you to everyone for your talks. It's really informative. Darryl, sorry for what you said. Dan, a question for you. I came across, as somebody mentioned about Leonardo da Vinci and using polyphasic sleep.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know what's your thoughts on that, and also how it affects longevity and health.
Yeah. Let's see.
So you can use
I'll just use this.
Yeah. Just
The perspective about the importance of sleep has changed over time. At many different points in time, humans have considered it a waste and have looked to find ways to avoid it and get more time in their day. There are multiple patterns of sleeping: biphasic sleep, monophasic sleep, one sleep period a day. Biphasic is having a siesta. The question is polyphasic sleep something that humans can do and maintain the adequacy of the sleep need to help to our physiology? One thing I'll say is that it's been recently popularized, polyphasic sleep, that is, as a way to actually shorten the amount of sleep that you need to get in a 24-hour period. There is no evidence of that. There is evidence that, let's say, over a 100-hour mission in the military, that you will perform better getting some 10-minute nap periods or sleep periods versus none at all. But it does not, the implication in what's been popularized by certain people, Tim Ferriss being one of them, is that actually all you need to do is get REM sleep. That's what he said. And if you could optimize around just getting the highest fraction of REM sleep, then that's all you need. Now, we tend to focus a lot on deep sleep and REM sleep. They are very important. But the continuity of all the sleep stages, there's important elements to all of them for the preparation and transfer of memories to allow for plasticity to happen. They're all doing something that matters to our health. So what we do know that there is a good natural example of polyphasic sleep, which is parenting. If you have a young child and they're up a lot at night, then you have to wake up. And so you can, as long as you're getting an adequacy of time, then you can probably thrive. But I don't think it's a strategy to reduce the amount of sleep that we need. Yeah, sure.
My question is for Pedro. We know that people who are living in paleo niche are not numerous, but they are extensively studied. And recently, it was shown that they have low-grade inflammation, mainly for and due to parasites. But it was unexpected that they don't have any atheroma. So my question is, can you comment on this issue? And is it a proof that inflammation is only a cause or a risk factor for plaque rupture, but doesn't have any link with plaque building?
Okay, thank you very much, Guy. Very, very nice question. So the study that I think you're referring to, I have it here. Okay. So I think the study that you're referring to, it's the study with Tsimani, right, from the Bolivia. So indeed, Tsimani that have been studied by Gervan and Kaplan. It's a beautiful study, and in fact, the last paper was published on the Lancet. And I think, I don't know if it was you, but someone today mentioned that they have the lowest calcium score of any population measured. So indeed, it was you, Guy-André, who mentioned that. So thank you for that. So this is true. And then you see their C-reactive protein, it's high. So what you say is, okay, they have chronic inflammation. But you cannot say that. That's something that cannot be said, because when you only measure CRP once, sometimes it's high, sometimes it's not. It depends, especially on a traditional population that is exposed to various pathogens. So what you need to do is to measure it multiple times. That's what Thomas McDade did on the Schwarr population. He measured 3 times, and he saw that when they had infections, it was really high. When they didn't have infections, it was really low. And also we have data from another population in Africa. It's an agricultural population, but it's traditional agriculturalists. They also have very low C-reactive protein. We have our own data from Kitava that it's not still finished, but the preliminary analysis shows that C-reactive protein is lower on the Kitava population from Papua New Guinea, a traditional horticulturalist population, than Swedish age matched healthy Swedish individuals. So this means that I cannot say that this population from Bolivia, that Tsimane, that they do have chronic inflammation. I don't know. I mean, they could, but I don't think that with the data that they have published, we can say that. So that's why many researchers in the field have criticized that comment that was made regarding the Tsimane by the researchers who studied the Tsimane. So I think that inflammation is very relevant, and I think that also exposure to parasites will actually dampen your inflammatory response, because it will elicit a more regulatory phenotype. I'm sorry, but I'm Portuguese, as you know. So a more regulatory phenotype. So this means that your immune cells are like, for instance, the tax officers. They don't want to kill. This means the parasite is like, in this case, a parasite. It's like the tax officer. He doesn't want to kill you. He wants to rip off your money, but to do it during your whole life. So the parasite will elicit, so it will secrete various molecules that will calm down your immune system. So this means that when you have, for instance, helminth, an infection with helminth, what happens is they don't kill you. So what they do is they will induce the differentiation of dendritic cells into regulatory dendritic cells, and from T cells into T regulatory cells, B cells into B regulatory cells. So those cells will all elicit a calm down response. So they will decrease the inflammatory response, they will prevent an autoimmune response. So in fact, there are various studies nowadays showing that people who are exposed to helminths, they have a low risk of autoimmune diseases and allergic diseases. So I would say that it's the other way around, that perhaps the Tsimane, they don't have chronic inflammation, but because they only measured it once, that was the time where perhaps they had an infection, I don't know.
And also, they're very active. So
yes.
If it was after a bout of some bigger activity, you would have elevated CRP acutely too, as well.
Good.
So post-exercise, for example, where there's muscle breakdown, recovering, you will have elevated CRP, but it's short-lived, and then you will get a significant reduction in chronic, in long-term CRP elevation.
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to correctly infer the cause of disease by looking exclusively at biomarkers. That there could be very different conditions where an elevation in an inflammatory molecule could be absolutely in perfect balance or homeostasis with the body doing its thing. And in another condition, it could actually be representative of dyshomeostasis. So, like you said, I think we need to identify phenotypes of people in different populations, but comparing them, while we should do it, there's probably more analysis that needs to happen there.
For sure. Proteomics is the next big thing, yeah.
Proteome, yeah.
The question about Lynda Frassetto. You showed the last study that you performed with alkaline powder. But what's your opinion about alkaline reduced water?
Alkalizing.
The reduces water, the machines that make alkaline water.
Sorry, what was the
Alkaline water.
Yeah, what do I think about?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you have any experience about in your career?
So there is one of my colleagues, Peter Burkhardt from Geneva, who actually looked at the pH of various mineral waters to see whether or not it made a difference. And in fact, he did show, he was looking at things like urinary calcium excretion, and this has been shown before. If you drink alkaline mineral water, then in fact you lower your urinary calcium excretion. The thought is that you're not breaking down your bones as much for the alkaline, and when you do that, then the calcium is just floating around. You want to regulate your blood calcium levels, so you dump the extra calcium in your urine. So, in fact, people have looked at drinking alkalinized mineral water. So, I'm going to say, in as much as I think it probably would be a good idea, the answer to that one is right.
Thank you all very much for your brilliant and passionate talks today. Question for you, Darryl. You talked about the benefits of physical activity in the context of cancer prevention. What's the actual evidence around the benefits of physical activity in terms of cardiovascular health?
Hello? I'm not going to answer that because I didn't do any preparation for it, Chris, so I apologize. I'm not joking. So, of course I've got an opinion on that. So, well, one of the first studies I looked at, looking at physical activity inactivity as being part of chronic lifestyle disease, was a paper by Jeremy Morris in the 1950s, 1953, published in The Lancet. And it was a comparison of London bus drivers who seemed to be dying of heart attacks at a far greater rate than the rest of the population. So we started to compare London bus drivers with London bus conductors. So that comparison meant it was the same demographic, same diet, pretty much everything was identical, lived in the same localities, etc., etc., etc. The one difference was bus drivers were 90% sedentary for their day, and bus conductors were walking up and down double-deckers for most of their day. What was interesting, the bus drivers had 3 times more likely to die of a heart attack than the bus conductors, and twice as likely to, after a cardiac incident to die. So there's certainly, from the 1950s up until the present day, there's been a significant amount of work looking at sedentary occupations and the increased risk of cardiovascular disease, for one. So there were postal workers, those who went out to deliver post versus those who sought mail in the office versus those who sat at the desk. And basically the least active of those individuals more likely to die of a heart attack. In terms of the underlying mechanisms, what's really interesting is pretty much all of the lipid profile, what we want to see from a good lipid profile, whether it's low triglycerides, whether it's LDL-HDL ratios, LDL total cholesterol ratios, low homocysteine levels, all of those cardiovascular risk factors and health markers are significantly improved if you're physically active versus a sedentary population. So I would suggest, given that cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer in the developed world, one. Secondly, there's a significant decrease in physical activity, whereas we're the most sedentary now than ever before. And finally, the fact that the heart is a muscle, as mentioned by Michael Crawford, we don't tend to talk about that aspect of the heart. We tend to talk about the surrounding vessels, we tend to talk about atherosclerosis and all the other things that we tend to talk about. But ultimately, the heart's a muscle. It's not designed for us to be sedentary. And so cardiovascular health. Does that answer the question? Okay.
And actually, can I just say one thing? And sorry, I'm just going to take this opportunity to say one thing regarding physical activity. It has been said many times, and I also believe that a lot, that if you do endurance training, so that you will increase your cardiovascular risk. And indeed there are a few studies that show that endurance athletes, master endurance athletes, so long distance athletes, they have more atherosclerosis. But in fact they have more stable plaques than the ones that do not do exercise. So I mean, I think exercise follows a U-curve, such as most things in life, but not doing exercise is worse than doing a lot of exercise, I would say.
And the dangers, just quickly to add, and the dangers tend to come in when you're doing 15 times as much as the recommendation. So it's 150 minutes a week recommended. That's a significant amount of physical activity where it can actually become problematic. That's what the research tells us now. The cardiovascular health.
You have a couple of things for Dr. Bastos. The first is a consideration on the list of inflammatory pathways. I would add a thing, because there's an increasing evidence that chronic overexposure to man-made electromagnetic radiation increases reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species, and ultimately leads to oxidative stress and then inflammation pathways. So we should pay attention to 5G and others man-made overexposure electromagnetic radiation. This is the first thing. The second thing is what is your take on what I think is misconception about the role of arachidonic acid in inflammation, because it's an essential molecule to trigger and peaking inflammation. And on the other hand, both DHA and arachidonic acid are crucial to resolve inflammation. On the other hand, especially thinking about over-supplementation of omega-3, DHA, in my opinion, should have a major role, and but EPA, on the other hand, what is going to do is going to lower inflammation and not reaching the peak, and then not resolving completely, and thus can ultimately lead to chronic, low-grade chronic inflammation. We are talking about a heavy overconsumption of EPA respect to arachidonic acid and DHA. So arachidonic acid should not be blamed as a villain, but everything should come in balance. What do you think about it?
Okay, thank you. I think you answered most of your questions. But so in terms of electromagnetic radiation, I don't know much about it, so I cannot comment on it, because it's not a field that that I read about. So I cannot comment. But regarding arachidonic acid, I can comment, which is a field that I've read a few things about. And I can tell you that you're right, arachidonic acid is necessary to induce inflammation, so it's a physiological necessary molecule. It's also very important for the brain. Michael Crawford has shown that a long time ago, more than 40 years ago, that arachidonic acid and DHA are important for the brain. But in terms of inflammation specifically, so arachidonic acid, it initiates inflammation, and then because it gives rise to lipoxins, those lipoxins will elicit the resolution of inflammation. And you said that DHA is also necessary. Indeed, DHA also elicits the production of resolvins, protectins, and marazines. All of those molecules will induce the resolution of inflammation. Regarding EPA, I agree, but not completely. So EPA also elicits resolvins that will elicit the resolution of inflammation. It's true that EPA competes directly with arachidonic acid, so they compete for the same enzymes, they compete from the same position in the cell membrane. So indeed, if you increase EPA a lot, your arachidonic acid status will decrease, and also the production of the various eicosanoids from arachidonic acid will also decrease. And that will have an effect on inflammation. So if you have a patient with rheumatoid arthritis, you will decrease inflammation. But nonetheless, it's what you said is if you increase EPA a lot, then you cannot reach peak inflammation, you won't get resolution of inflammation. And from what I've read, it's a theoretical thing. So I don't know if this is in fact happening. It could be, but we also know that in order for you to do that, you have to do what you said. You have to ingest a lot of EPA compared to arachidonic acid. But if you ingest fish and meat and eggs, you'll get EPA, DHA, and arachidonic acid. So the problem would only come when you start supplementing omega-3 fatty acids, especially EPA, for a long time and high doses. And in that case, perhaps that can happen, but I've never seen evidence. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm only saying that I haven't seen it.
It's important to remember, is this on?
I don't think
Yes. Yeah, there we are. It's important to remember that 99.99% of the time, arachidonic acid is acting as the precursor for prostacyclin, which enables your blood vessels to relax and contract, enables the blood flow, and stops all this nonsense that we're talking about. And the illustration of the significance of this was the COX-2 inhibitors that were Pfizer developed for rheumatoid arthritis and killed people and resulted in a class action of multi-million-dollar attack on these two pharmaceutical companies, and the FDA had to remove it. And the reason why? Because they were inhibiting prostacyclin synthesis from arachidonic acid.
And I have a little quick clinical head scratcher for you. I had some studies that showed supplementing with DHA during. However, all of the studies supplementing with DHA, for example, for clinical depression, total bust. The only thing that works is either EPA or EPA greater than DHA. So, just a thought for you.
Two things about that.
That's your field.
The first is that any supplementation during pregnancy is too late to be effective. Neurogenesis, and in fact cardiovascular genesis, starts first. The first organ you see is a small beating heart. And organogenesis cannot happen unless the vascular system, the cardiovascular system, develops first. And the brain depends on the cardiovascular system. Right? So in effect, all of this happens before the mother reports to us for pregnancy care. And anything you do after that, and our own intervention studies show that anything after that is miles too late.
First of all, thanks for your wonderful insight from each of you on your area of expertise. It's exciting to see and to listen to. Nutrition education in schools is non-existent, as we touched upon, but I also think that physical education is also becoming non-existent within schools.
That's for you.
Along with sleep education and a whole other manner of levers or pillars of health. So with physical education dissipating, how do we build a resilient, how can we build a resilient child essentially? How can we bring that back into the school system? What is the minimum, or what is the effect of those 4 children to be having and seeing that into their teens, into adulthood? Because not only is food and nutrition hyper-engineered for palatability, and the commercial interest in the food industry is very powerful, in the movement space it's not. So how can we make that leap or that pillar really prominent, and what sort of guidelines can we be given to? I hope that makes some sort of sense. And then questions to Darryl.
Firstly, I'm going to ask, this is on behalf of my mother, can you please watch my TED talk? Because she's been watching it up to now, and I want to give her a break. But the reason being, because I want to discuss some of these issues, bigger picture issues around what our children are currently having to deal with based on being play deprived and being physically active play deprived. So there's a few things here. There's a play researcher called, with a couple of prominent ones. One is Peter Gray and one is Stuart Brown. Stuart Brown was tasked in the 60s to investigate serial killers and what was common amongst all of them. And most significant was play deprivation. So kids being isolated, not being allowed to play, not being given toys. Many of those kids became mass murderers in the US. And so there's an association, there's a link between play deprivation and activity deficit disorders and mental health disorders in our young children. And in a very, very short space of time, so definitely from my childhood in the 70s, there's been a significant shift of deprioritizing play. So now, kids today, for example, from finishing school in July, they're breaking for the summer and going back in September, kids are less fit in September than all of the fitness that they've gained over the academic year. Because most of their 6 weeks, which is our holiday time here, is spent indoors, now spent on on devices. Parents are not happy about letting their kids go out and free roam, free range play. So that's also a problem. So many kids are not developing their natural ability to be able to risk assess, to develop, resolve conflict, to be able to navigate the world around them and the environment around themselves. Because now adults are enforcing and dictating exactly what they should be doing. So there are many things that children only do if parents are around. So I'm sure many of us remember that being the case, right? There are certain things you will only attempt if there is no adult supervision. Climbing that tree, climbing that wall, going miles away from home on your bike ride and wondering if you're going to get back on time. All these adventures that many of us experience as kids is pretty much deficient from the landscape today. So I would say we don't need more physical education. Actually, our kids just need an opportunity to be more active. The more active children are, the more active you're likely to maintain that activity into adulthood. And so that's what we need to do again. I'm not sure how we're going to get there, because even if I had a child now, if I wanted to make my child free range, there's going to be a significant backlash. My friend wasn't allowed to have his son walking to school at 11 years old without parental supervision. I walked to school when I was 5 years old back then, and it wasn't a problem. Now went on public transport, those weren't issues. So I could talk about this forever, have a look at my TED talk, but I do feel concerned about our kids and the lack of physical activity opportunities, as well as all the other big picture stuff that we're well aware of around nutrition. So let's give kids the opportunity to play again. Let us parents become less helicopter parents, less bulldozer parents, which I've heard is the latest term, and let our kids be kids again.
There's somebody over here who wants to ask
Yes.
I'm just going to continue to keep Darryl occupied before we give us another exercise. Can you touch a bit on, so like you talked about the breathing and nutrient exercises, you can expand on that in terms of gut health and microbiome. And question for Lynda as well. You had a few slides on telomeres. So like they have high expression in cancer cells. Could you talk a bit about supplementing telomeres with like rates of if it causes cancer or something like that? more likely to cause cancer, supplementing for patients that have cancer, something along those lines. That's what
Lynda can answer that, I'll answer next.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to answer about the telomerase stuff, nobody has any idea. Presumably this is what's happening in healthy cells, okay? Cancer cells work differently, okay? And so I'm not so sure that what we're talking about in regular cells is the same thing that happens in cancer cells. And to tell you the truth, I haven't seen any research on this, so I can't answer your question. To answer your other questions about the gut microbiome.
It was for the, yeah. Sterile. There you go.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, it's quite fascinating that the gut health or gut microbiome health does respond to physical activity, because you wouldn't suspect a direct relationship between the two. But there's an interesting animal study on the type of physical activity behavior and how that can impact on the gut flora. So imagine a scenario: you've got sterilized mice, kind of genetically sterilized, and then one set of mice are infected with celiac disease. And the celiac disease mice are exercised. And then the exercised mice, they then put the gut flora into these sterilized mice and see what happens. What's interesting, and then get those sterilized mice to then exercise. What's interesting is mice that are forced to exercise, so literally they're kind of chained to their treadmill wheel, have no disease regression from reversal of celiac disease. But the mice that are able to play, i.e. they will freely use that wheel, have complete disease regression. So what's quite interesting is the experiences we have whilst we're being physically active are also as important as the activity itself is kind of more important in terms of context on the impact on the gut microbiome. And there's some interesting studies now being done on how that impacts humans. So humans who have a predilection to exercise and seem to enjoy it, will the gut flora respond more favorably in that environment? But some interesting research out there for sure, just PubMed, physical activity and the gut microbiome. Well, initially it's about just the activity versus inactivity. There's an increase in diversity, there's an increase in volume, tip. But also now research is also suggesting that the more pleasurable the physical activity, there's an even greater significance for gut flora. And so it's whether that happens in humans too. That's currently being looked at in the research. And in terms of the activation, so butyrate and other short-chain fatty acids are actually activated by physical activity as well.
So thank God I didn't force myself to go to the gym. And so now, just to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to give the last word to Michael Crawford.
Thank you. Yeah, well, actually, I guess I'm going to respond to Daryl's negative approach about education. One of the reasons we have this chaos at the moment in the food business is because of lack of education. The people who are chairmen and board members of the food and agricultural industry and the ministers of food and agriculture today know nothing about nutrition. You know nothing about nutrition and the non-communicable diseases. And that's because of lack of education. Yes, we need an ecological approach, that's absolutely right. But if you don't have education, then the people won't know how to make use of the ecological approach. And that ecological approach is going to have to include the agriculturalization of the oceans. And without that, humanity's finished. Because there isn't enough food to be gathered elsewhere for the next billion that we're going to have in 11 years' time. So education is only a part of it, but it is an essential component
Yes.
of empowering people with knowledge.
Thank you.
100% agree.
With that, I hope you all feel empowered to go out and try to change the world. Because really, we do it a little bit at a time. I mean, I don't feel like I can change the world, but I feel like I can do one little bit. And my little bit of this is we videotape our talks so that it's not just the people in the room who learn about what we think is important, but we put this information out to the world so that hopefully other people will do that too. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for being here all day long. We super appreciate all of your work. So, and thank you all to my team, who's really super here all day long.
It was nice.
Actually, guys, can we give the speakers another round of applause? There were some people here who literally flew in and arrived last night from across the world to be here, so I think they deserve give yourselves a round of applause because we're all making a difference, right? So give yourself a round of applause too. Make it loud, come on guys. Thank you.
Professor Crawford.